Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 5 of the Outcast Haven podcast. Tonight, we're going to talk some Dragon Ball Super. I am joined by a couple of my teammates. We've got Michael Berg, aka Bergie,
Hello.
and then we have the one and only Robert Wang, aka Illiterate.
What's going on, everybody? Hope you saw the aggro cell deck. It did a number on a Vajix this week at Weekly, so that's dope. Bringing Yamcha next. Get ready.
All right, so tonight we're going to talk about a few different things. Our general topics are going to cover some of the announcements by Bandai, and then talk a little bit about locals. So first off, I want to get you guys' thoughts on the set release adjustment by Bandai. So the idea that they have pushed back the set 11 release of Vermilion Bloodline, and then as of right now, I can't really find an official release other than the October 30th, like the original release for Draft Box 6. So we don't know if that's getting pushed back. What do you guys think about that? Robert, what do you like them pushing back the sets with everything going on right now?
Yeah, I definitely like them pushing back the sets. I mentioned locals a little bit earlier. I've been going for about 2 weeks. It's still not like an official tournament, but people are meeting up for open play. We're all wearing masks, but it's a good group. It's fun to play against other people in person again. So I think that pushing back the set gives us a chance to play with kind of set 10 for a little bit longer. I have to imagine that they're going to push back the draft box. I do think that a release once a month is really aggressive, even though, anniversary is smaller, but it helps from a wallet standpoint. It helps from, the fact that not everybody's been able to play in person. And so kind of spreading out the timeline between sets, I think, is a net positive. I'm still having a ton of fun with set 10.
Yeah, I think it's important because right now you're finally starting to see some locals open up. Bandai is pushing pretty hard to get online tournaments with support. And now they announced the play kits for order for like the play at home kit, which I think is another way people are going to get a chance to get together with maybe their friends bubble, as a lot of people are calling it. And it's just a chance to get some kits out, to get people to play some official events, to people to play even some unofficial events with some support and some of the cards. It's a way that they're getting cards in players' hands that we otherwise didn't have a means to get, which is really cool. I know, Bergie, you've been playing actually on Saturdays at a supported local, which I know they ran out of tournament support, but that's actually kind of a good thing right now. But we actually have a supported local happening right now, and that's pretty good, right? Like you actually have to sign up in advance.
Yeah, they had to sign up in advance. It was to the point where we had a waiting list of people, and I was unfortunately for the last one unable to get into it. But there was a wait list of like 2, 3 people before, just to wait and see if other people were going to show up at all, which all of them did. It was all 8 people. And the pricing felt good, and I think they handled it really well. Like Robert said, they all wear masks. It's the same group of people. And the store was pretty spaced out, so everyone was socially distancing. And I think overall, everybody's spirits towards this were let's open this up slowly and make sure everyone's safe, which I think is good.
Yeah, it's nice just to have locals again. I know for us, we have our small play group, and we've kind of treated it as a mini bubble inside our world that we allow to happen. And then we've had kind of some pseudo outcast events that we've been able to do. But it's nice to see people that you haven't seen as much because you're trying to keep your distance right now. You're trying to follow all the goal, the guidelines, and fulfill the goal of getting society back to normal, and especially just getting back to weeklies, because weeklies really is. I mean, everybody loves to play the big tournament. It's fun to go play a big event. But at the end of the day, a lot of us play the game for that local scene where there's competition and there's store championships. They're not national level or regional level, but it's nice to play against your friends and people that you've met along the way. And it's nice that they created even the play kits at home that you could order from Core TCG that gave people a chance to get some of those cards that otherwise don't have locals in their area. And maybe even that gets cards in the hands of players who have never had a local, which is really cool. You 3 or 4 guys that play together, go to big events, play on Untap, but they've never had a chance to go play somewhere. It's cool that they do that because it's a chance to get kits in players' hands.
I think the kits are a great idea, and I think, even getting into Gen Con, I think all of us got a chance to play on the Saturday after they opened up two more tournaments via webcam. But I won't lie, I didn't even know about the first wave of signups. I must have missed the announcement on the group page. So I know how hard it was, and I believe it sold out super quick. And so the problem is a lot of people haven't had access to the champ packs, and I know that the market's been flooded with them as almost everybody has gotten their packs. Great job to, I think it was Tac Gaming. Thanks for
Mhm.
getting out the packs. Want to say thank you. I appreciate it. I enjoyed opening those packs. But I think if you didn't get a chance to sign up for Gen Con, and also another shout out, we did fill out that survey for September online tournaments. I haven't heard anything yet. I'm kind of crossing my fingers. So if anybody wants to let us know, that'd be awesome. But if you weren't able to participate in these tournaments, having the option to get the kit as opposed to buying it on the market, whereas some of the cards can be super expensive, like Metacooler, namely, I think is just a great thing for everybody to have a chance to get these cards.
Yeah, it makes it easier, even if there's a few guys locally that play together who otherwise wouldn't get to play in a tournament. It's one per address, so each of them could technically pick one up, which is really cool. Not by Bandai to just they're trying hard to get product in people's hand, which right now is tough. It's tough to be dealing with everything going on in the world on a small scale level, obviously in our normal world, and businesses are having to change their business models and their business plans. And I think to Bandai's credit, they're doing a good job of doing their best to adjust things. Another thing that is super interesting, along with the kit stuff, is the errata kits that are coming that they announced, which is really cool because I know personally we come from a game that leaned hard into the errata and kind of refused to ban anything like officially. They would basically ban it by errataing it to death, which I think was worse than just getting rid of the card. But I know for me personally, I hate playing with errata cards and not having the correct text. So the errata kits are super cool. And I know that you guys, I know Bergie in particular has some thoughts on the errata kit. So what are your thoughts on the errata kit, Bergie?
All right, so this is tinfoil hat time, guys. Everybody bust them out. I genuinely think these packs are just going to be all the erratas from the new upcoming ban and restricted announcement. Because if you look at all the old errata cards, they're all garbage. Like, there's very few of them that are actually playable, so there will be no use to playing them. I could totally see them reprinting some draft box cards and errataing them minorly so that they could just effectively reprint them. Like Obuni, they could make it 2 clone tokens instead of 3, which probably would make it a lot worse, but it would throw it into the hands of more people and like other things like that.
That's some straight disrespect shade thrown at my boy Serge Cell and his errata Android absorber. Granted, I know it's already been printed, but you were just like, man, all cards that got errata are garbage. So that's straight shade. Also, I think anybody who wants to nerf Obuni needs to get good with a GIT and a GUD. I definitely don't think Obuni is the biggest problem in the format. I do want to give ourselves a shout out because I'm not above, giving myself props. But we kind of talked about Bibbidi a couple weeks ago, and lo and behold, it's all the rage to talk about Bibbidi. And I will say, watching, the Dalen Mack Invitational, which I think is super cool for the community. So props to everybody who made that happen and all the streamers and stuff like that. But watching a Vajik's final and then come down to, kind of, what was it, 181 combo power with 4
It
Bibbities.
was 4.
It definitely kind of reinforced our point there. So, I mean, tinfoil hat, I can see that happening. To be fair, there aren't a ton of cards that I've seen with erratas being played, but you did totally throw shade at Cell, so I have to call you out on that. So it definitely could be, but I think it's a great idea. I don't like playing with cards that are errated because I can't remember what the errata is unless it's a super common card. So if someone were to play with an errated card right now other than Android Absorber, I wouldn't know. And so if they didn't want to tell me what it was errated to, I would just let it roll. So
It's also hard on new players when they're getting access to the game. You never want to you never want someone to show up at locals and play something and then have to give them the old, actually, because that, it feels bad for everybody involved. You don't feel great calling out somebody on something that they didn't know, and they definitely don't feel good getting called out when like they think they're going to win on something and then you find out like, oh, got it. Yep. And granted, a lot of people, if they're lifelongers in card games, they probably went and find the ban list, they find the errata list, and they got it figured out. But it does feel nice that they're going to get the kits in people's hand, because you assume those cards won't be too expensive unless they're really expensive cards inherently, which I don't think they will be. I don't think they're going to errata stuff that was an expensive card, because that would create a weird market situation where then you're going to have people asking, well, can I play with the banned card and just remember the errata? Or can I play with it? It's like they're going to have weird stuff where you're going to have to start, it creates a weird situation. But when you talk about banned stuff, I think that's probably one of the hottest topics right now, because we are coming up on set 11. We haven't had an emergency ban other than the U3 stuff, which was a completely fair ban. Typically they won't do the emergency one, which means we're coming up on the ban announcement for set 11, which they could do a week before, 2 weeks before, or the day before. But that obviously changes how the meta is shaped, how things look. And obviously Bibbidi, that's the big one. That's the one that everybody wants. I personally would be curious if they don't touch Bibbidi, but they do something to Fu Mission Accomplished, because that's the card that cycles it back into your hand. So maybe that's the card they get rid of to try and find a way to punish Vajix for milling it. So now they have to cycle their deck in order to get it back. There's no way to get it in hand other than to recycle your deck, which then lowers the power of Bibbidi until you blow your discard up again. I think that might be something they would consider, maybe banning that or somehow restricting those two from being together. Otherwise, I think Bibbidi just goes to being like if you have an evil wizard leader.
I also could see them doing something to the Vajik's leader, because Bibbidi isn't a problem in any other black deck because you can't fill your graveyard so fast. But with something like Vajik's, you can fill your graveyard ridiculously quick, to the point where it's almost advantageous to have half your deck in your drop area now, because you can play off of it so well.
You also have inherent protection from it, where with a Boo deck, you have to be careful at some point if the game goes too long. If you're playing a slower control deck, you do have to have answers. Oftentimes you have to sideboard in things like Hatch Hatred Everlasting, or things that put stuff back into your deck, because you need mill protection. Vajix doesn't get punished for putting all but one card in, because they're never going to lose by drawing that one card. All they do is get benefit from it. So it creates an issue where the card is unevenly balanced in one deck versus another. So anybody else playing a black deck, the only way they benefit more than another black deck is by putting more cards in deck, so that hopefully at the end of the game, if they've got 4 cards left in deck, now they have 50 cards in drop instead of 46 cards in drop or something, because they've run it that way. The other one that Bergie mentioned a little bit in talks has been Obuni, but I tend to live in the Robert world, where I say, if you think Obuni is a problem, you just need to get good, because
I agree.
I don't think he's that big of an issue. There are so many things that fix him. The main ones are obviously any sort of Nimbus or something like that. The other ones that I think people oftentimes don't just choose not to play, but currently in the meta, I think honestly maybe the best solution for Obuni actually resolves a lot of issues with something like Agents of Destruction. It helps with Ginyu or Peel Off, things that want to spam stuff to the board. Is you just run Black Mass Sand. Like that's such an easy fix for that, because then they get punished for every token coming into play.
Yeah, and I
If
think
you're especially
go ahead, Bert.
if you're especially evil and you want to make them discard their entire hand, you could also run that. I don't know if it costs 2 or 1. I know it's a green negate counterplay, and it says if the battle card being played is either placed in drop or your opponent discards 2.
Yeah.
And because the tokens can't go to drop, they're forced to discard 2 for each token that comes into play.
Yeah.
Gross.
There are answers for him. I think people just refuse to run them in their main board. They want to sideboard it, and then they get salty because they lose best of ones to Obuni.
Well, and I also want to call out, like, the way to deal with Obuni is very different than the quote-unquote options that people say to deal with Bibbidi, right? Like, I want to play Topo. I probably want to play Flying Nimbus, Dormant Potential, the shutdown negates. I don't want to play, North East Kai or Jocko,
Yeah.
right, to remove the combo. Like that's not what I want to do. Like, you know, so the answers versus Obuni are very different to the answers versus Bibbidi, and I have to call that out because everybody's being like, Bibbidi's not a problem because you could just run 4 of this absolute card. Am I allowed to say that?
We can bleep it out. We can bleep it out in post.
In your deck, like, no, that's not, like, no one's gonna mainboard it. It's honestly terrible.
If you need a mainboard garbage card, there's a problem with the thing that you're countering.
Yeah, and let's be honest, like if you have a really efficient 50 card deck, are you going to go to 54 to make your draws that much less efficient, or are you going to swap out 4 of your efficient cards for 4 bad cards just for one matchup? Because that's the issue. Is right now in the world we live in, that's the thing people also aren't thinking about, is maybe Bibini gets unbanned. Maybe it becomes the first card that becomes unbanned once we shift back to big events being best of 3s. Right now, with everything online being a little slower, taking a longer time, and with locals being best of 1s because there are time constraints, I think that's part of the issue, is everything's a best of 1. So you don't want to sideboard bad cards to not lose to Vajix, but in a best of 1, you're forced to alter your deck in a way that makes your deck less efficient or makes it play worse into your good matchups. You're actually forcing that deck to be bad or worse than it should be, which is super unfair to people. So why not just ban Bibbidi and then have a discussion later about, you know what, now that the world has gone back to a best of 3 world and it's more common to play best of 3s in big events, let's unlock something, or let's put it on the restricted list so people can play a 1 of. Obviously 1 of can still be an issue, but 1 of doesn't stack the effect, which is primarily the issue. Is 1 Bibbidi feels bad, but there's a chance you combo out of 1 Bibbidi. There is 0 chance you combo out of 4. Mathematically, the only way you combo out of 4 is if you have 4 and also more cards in hand. So you're playing the Vajik's Mirror, which is super, like it's a very narrow place where you can combo out of 4 Bibbidis.
I want to jump in. You mentioned unbanning things, so I know something near and dear to your heart, Blake. Turles is on the ban list.
Here we go.
All right, so are we going to start the campaign to free Turles?
Hashtag free Turles.
Hashtag free Turles. Free Turles, baby.
Right.
You guys won't buy your foils expecting it to.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I do not own 12 Turles.
Do you think that we're 3xg?
Oh gosh,
So I was kind of shocked when we mentioned this earlier. The last card talking about potentially being banned, Koitsukai. I haven't seen too much about this, but I do think new baby is terrifying. And
it's amazing.
Not even like in the, it's going to be like the best deck. I just think it's going to be so terrible to play against. Like I'm already
new Invoker.
I'm already going to break up with Bergie because he won't get off this baby bandwagon, and I'm like, we can't be friends anymore. But I do think that Koitsukai, and I think the market agrees with me, it's up to $40, I think, is the way to shut down baby. Do you think that they're going to ban Koitsukai just so baby can run wild and make people sad?
So here's the issue. In a normal world, I would say there's no reason to ban it because I think it creates a good balance. If people want to play it, that's fine. I think it being short printed creates a little bit of a problem because it was a draft box 5 card. It creates a real volatile price market for it. People will have to overpay for it to get their hands on a playset of them if they don't already have them, which is a little bit unfortunate, which is why if they're going to ban it, I would rather they ban it sooner rather than later. Don't wait until the card is $80 and then ban it like some of the U3 stuff was doing. They banned that stuff a little late, and as a result, a lot of people paid more than market value because the cards were so good. I would rather they
paid for less. Shout outs to 3xg.
Yeah, or they paid less. At the very end when it was about ban. But so Koitsukai, I think personally, I'm interested in baby only because I like playing blue and I like to play baby because that was the first deck I ever really grinded hard and made the best deck I could make it. So I'm a little attached to the character and the color. That's the reason I want to play it. However, saying that, I have 0 issue with Koitsukai because it's a good check. I think you need to be able to check decks that could be problems because otherwise what happens is you get filled with a meta full of control decks, and that's just not fun for anybody who doesn't play that deck. And even people who play that deck, the mirror is usually not fun. It's a miserable experience. So it creates a really miserable play experience for kind of the community. So having a really strong check to it is a healthy thing. I think Invoker has had a time to shine, and now I think that some of the stuff they've made in this set and next set is going to really put the brakes on Invoker being a powerhouse, which isn't the worst thing because number one, it shifts the meta, and number two, it keeps control decks as good decks that have strong checks. And I think any deck should have a good check, and that's part of the reason U3 got banned, is because Vajix with U3 was effectively the most miserable play experience anyone has ever had. Since at least what I hear is like, the Storm days. But I didn't experience the misery of the Storm days, so I can't account for that.
Bergie, how do you feel about Blake talking smack about your Invoker?
What? Nah, Invoker's fine. Again, if Baby Janumba becomes meta, I'll gladly run Invoker and do it. That deck wins by swinging. Invoker just says, haha, no swings for you. And the mirror for that is going to be the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm excited for
Baby's
Baby.
just going to be the bounce game. It's just going to who bounces what to each other's hands the most. It'll be a very
It's going to be
bizarre.
so miserable.
I just want to play the mirror because I think it would be the most hilariously miserable experience ever. It's like two people just being miserable together, and they deserve each other.
Yeah, Bergie,
coming from the Invoker mirror, I genuinely think the Baby Janumba is going to be worse.
The Super Baby.
Super Baby.
The Super Baby. Excuse me.
How much did you cap blow me for in one turn?
I didn't. I cap blowed you for like 3. But I dealt 4 damage off of just basic swings in Invoker.
No, you did 7, and you could have done 8 if you had an extra Senzu Bean. Don't lie. Oh, I only cap blow you for 3. No, it was 7. And yes, I had 7 health, and I got cap blowed for 7 on turn 5.
I sat there thinking, I'm fine. I will live. And I'm like,
Bergie went first.
Not.
And on his 5th turn with 5 energy, he cap blowed me for 7. But, it's fine. Invoker's fine.
Invoker is fine. See, the issue is you're running the one color with a terrible counterplay.
It's just Invoker is fine now because it's been pushed a little more to the fringe because there are some harder answers for it, which is good. But speaking of Baby, speaking of blue and all that stuff, the last couple weeks we've gotten a lot of blue reveals, and I think the blue reveals so far have been super interesting. Personally, that could be because I play a lot of blue and I like the blue archetype personally. So they speak to me, and I don't play green or yellow as a normal color. Even when I play another color, like I'm my topo, like monkey deck, even then I'm just like, let's put a little blue in there because then we can Senzu Bean. Because to me in this game, Senzu Bean is life. I should just, if I would have thought about it, I'd have bought like 40 of them when they were at like $2, $3. But I didn't, so now I have to, swap my Senzu Beans between all my decks because I can't live without Senzu Bean.
I know a guy who has an extra set. I'll give you his name later.
Yeah. Okay. So in the blue reveals, we got a lot of cards. They spoke to me. What do you guys think of the blue reveal so far?
Baby is miserable. I mean, just I don't know what to think. I just think that I don't play blue. At one point I thought I might like it, and then I realized I did not. But looking at Baby, it doesn't look like it's going to be fun to play. I think I think it'll be a good deck, with the -1 cost to counters, a ton of counters being spoiled. I think some of them are pretty good. I really like that negate, where then you can pitch a blue card and then you get to draw 2. I think it's a 2 cost, but with the planet Tuffle, it'll be a 1 cost. I think that's super good, especially in Baby. But I think that's my biggest fear. But I do think that the Vegeta looks cool with the ramp ability. I don't think it's broken. I think, Bergie, you had it proxied out, and we played a game or two, and it didn't seem like the end of the world. But yeah, my main takeaway is baby looks painful.
I think
I
the
agree.
Vegeta is interesting because it feels like it'll have a really good matchup into some things, and then other things it will be an absolute disaster. Because if you can negate skills on the leader card, if you can negate skills on some of the battle cards, it basically just becomes a really vanilla feeling deck. And if you can't ramp because you're playing into something like blue that can also negate you back to death, it kind of becomes this weird game of um, not even like chess. It just becomes like who drew into the most negates, counters, and things like that. So it's an interesting deck because I think Bergie's initial build of it felt strong and felt good, but it was funny because like playing into my blue Trunks deck, which is super negate heavy, I didn't feel bad at all. I just was like, I'm just gonna negate your leader swing, and it kind of got to this place where it was like, all right, it's not really ramping. The curve is kind of off now, and I think that's kind of the struggle with a deck like that is it can be really good, but then when you interrupt any deck's plan for like their cost curve, it makes the deck play out of character, which makes the deck inherently feel worse. And that's kind of what happens when you can just consistently negate the leader swing is it throws the ramp curve because now all those big cards that you want to play late game just kind of aren't there because you're kind of stopping it from doing what it wants to and you're throwing its game plan off. I think it would be an interesting match into something like the Sin Shenron deck because it has a lot of answers and it's blue, so it has a ton of answers. But then also Sin Shenron has a ton of skill negating and a ton of ways to affect it back. So it'd be a super interesting matchup. But I don't think the Vegeta deck's going to be that brutal to play in. I think Baby is going to probably be pretty feel bad because every card in the deck, except for Senzu Bean and a super combo, is probably going to say the word counter on it.
I'm making a prediction. I think if Vegeta's going to be successful, sorry, Berg, I cut you off, but Vegeta's going to be successful. UI, Goku's Kamehameha, the IAR, is going to be a big part of that, and its price already kind of spiked, but I think that it could go up even more just being a staple in the Vegeta deck, because I imagine, first turn you're going to swing. If they don't negate it, you're going to IAR. You either draw a card so you maintain your hand and you get the energy, or you're going to untap your energy for defense on the way back, and you're just going to mulligan for that card to get Vegeta going so that you can ramp up fast that way. That's my prediction.
Personally, I think the Baby deck is going to be better of the two. I think the Vegeta might be a little bit more of a janky build right now, but as soon as they print something like a bomb for blue, that deck will see a lot of play. Because that's the thing that the deck is missing the most. Like it's missing that closer, excuse me.
Turning
like
the
Android
tide.
17 turning the tide. It's good and it can finish games, but it's not a designated bomb that you need to remove immediately. Like it doesn't have an SCR that can just change the game.
What people miss about turning the tide is that it does get hit in green. Like Frieza can pop it. You lose your hand, but if they don't have a board state built up, you just both lost your hands basically for nothing. Because their auto doesn't fire until Frieza comes down. So like you both just basically now you both are just without a hand. Now granted, they get swing still after he comes down. So if they have a bunch of bodies, they can finish you. But if they don't have a way to finish you, you both now just sit there looking at each other 7 energy into a game, and you're like, we have no hands, we're doing nothing. Like it's kind of sounds like a hilarious scenario personally.
But if you're playing blue, you're going to turning the tide. I'm going to think I'm smart and go for Frieza counterplay. You're going to lay down the God Sealing technique, and I'm going to flip the table.
That's fair and that's true. I think the Vegeta has a chance to be good, but yeah, until it has like a finisher, I think that's what we were talking about, Berg, when we were playing it, was that it felt like it didn't have a way to end the game. So, and maybe there's an option, and then maybe the most important thing is what do you call those two decks, right? Is it just blue baby? Do you just call it baby blue? Do you call it?
I'm calling it baby invoker.
Do you call it prison baby?
Prison baby.
Prison baby. Prison baby.
Trademark it now.
Yep.
I still think that the best name I've seen, I think the two names I've seen for the Vegeta deck One is Ramp Vegeta. I'm not impressed by that
That's
one.
cursed.
That's just the one that I love is Vegeta because it feels so right. Like you can't tell me that calling a Vegeta deck Vegeta isn't like the most. It fills my soul with joy.
What happens when you get people who like don't read good like me and we're like veg tea?
Vegged. You playing that vegged? Vegged? Granted, that could be a little bit of a problem. True.
I'm a fan of Vegeta.
Vegeta, I like it
as well.
I'm curious personally if part of people's concern for Obuni doesn't come from the Vegeta deck, like the fact that it can ramp so hard if it hits, and maybe there are some things. Maybe it runs some of the baby cards like the counter, just to try and later in the game sit and turtle up. I know the scout report guys were talking about how that can be what you do sometimes in blue is if you can't win by turn maybe 4 or 5, then the solution is okay, if I can't win by turn 5, I'm just going to turtle and I'm going to get to turn 7, I'm going to turning the tide. Because if you can Obuni on turn 5 or 6 and they don't clear all of him and his tokens, then what happens is turn 7, you turning the tide and just crush their hands, and then you just finish them, because otherwise they're going to have so many cards in hand or so many ways to manipulate how they draw, which they don't really have on defense. It puts them in a really bad spot, which I think is sometimes the concern with blue ramping too hard, is that Obuni becomes too accessible.
Yeah, I don't think people are necessarily hating on Obuni because Vegeta. And the reason I say that is already there's like Zamasu who can ramp super hard, so it's not all that different, and a lot of it's driven by Zeno. So I think it'd be very similar in terms of speed to that. The Obuni hate is driven by the new Vegeta. I think the current decks, like Zamasu, already do very similar things. I think it's a different flavor of a very similar deck. From what I've seen so far, a lot of it revolves around Zeno and getting that extra energy. So if you had, the new Vegeta and you did hit on your first swing, it can get you a turn earlier, but it's I think things have to go right for that to happen. So I don't necessarily think Obuni hate is driven by the new Vegeta lead.
Well, and
I think it's more driven by Zamasu, if anything, because Zamasu is just so swing heavy, and it feels like it gets down big creatures so quick, and Obuni just leads into that as much as possible. Because if you encouraging presence Monaka and Obuni, it just feels like you have the entire Earth coming towards you, and you have one negate in hand.
Yeah, I think Zamasu definitely makes Obuni feel worse than a lot of other decks, because you awaken on 4 energy, so there are ways to cheat your energy to get you there on turn 2 or 3. So if I get the Cosmic Trader and then the Zeno, obviously it messes with my energy and I'm only going to have 2 standing, but you need a couple of beans and you're back to Obuni, you've got Monok. Like there are so many ways that on turn 3 or turn 4 you can unload just an absolute pile of swings, and the leader swings being 15 double strike twice, having the Obuni swing for 20, and then having 3 token swings for 15 is so much to absorb early in the game. But I think that's where, Robert is working really hard to make Yamcha viable. And one of the things that we've talked about with that deck is the issue for a lot of things is Zeno. Like Zeno is the thing that gives you trouble. People have a tendency to pick and choose the thing specifically that hurts them. It's like point where they hurt you. And a lot of times, like people, like they choose one source that hurts them and they refuse to like look beyond that to like a potential other option. It's like Bibbidi. Obviously Bibbidi feels bad, but the reality is the Fu mission accomplished might actually be the bigger problem, because if you mill 2 Bibbidi in your first couple turns in Vegeks, those just don't exist for the rest of the game unless you cycle your whole deck, in which case, if you get a Bibbidi back, he's not as powerful. So it becomes this weird game of you have to recycle your deck. Fu mission accomplished, putting it back in your hand at will is really the thing that gives you problems, because Fu mission accomplished has to be in the drop to do that. So he could go in the drop right next to a Bibbidi. You're now 2 energy away from getting your Bibbidi back. So maybe you hit Fu and then Bibbidi's not as much of a problem. I think the same can be said where I think what gives people trouble isn't Obuni, it's being Obuni'd on turn 3. Like, it's the fact that if you go second, then you might be on 2 energy when I charge my third, and now I get my Zeno energy and it's Obuni time. You have 2 energy. So your options are do nothing going into that turn just in case of Obuni, or do your normal stuff and then potentially just get kicked in the face.
And Obuni, chances are, gets to stand in energy even if they tap out, which it's obviously not the biggest problem, but it feels bad.
Yeah, in a lot of a battle card no matter what.
In a lot of the decks that run Obuni, I think the issue comes from the feel bad thing comes from the fact that they oftentimes have alternate awakened conditions. So they're probably going to have an awakened leader on top of Obuni. So now if you survive the Obuni turn, or when you survive the Obuni turn, you're probably losing hand advantage, right? You've taken a beating and they're awakened. So now you can awaken, but you have to awaken in order just to swing and hit them with your leader. So it puts you in this spot where it's just the Obuni paired with all of the other things that feel bad, which is why a lot of times I think you just have to have options and ways in your deck to deal with something like Zeno. You have to just keep them off the extra energy, especially in Zamasu, because Zeno is the thing that facilitates everything in that deck. I played it against Robert the other day, probably 6 or 7 times, and the game that felt absolutely catastrophically bad was the game where I didn't get Zeno until like turn 5, because I just couldn't find him. I was searching with I was drawing every card in my deck, and he just refused to come hang out with me. Like, Zeno was like, no, I'm not interested in you.
Well, the hat's out of the bag, but for those viewers, why am I playing Zamasu so much against Yamcha?
Can I please explain?
Bergie, go ahead and explain.
All right, cool. So, there's a little bit of a minor bet going on, and when I say minor, I mean major. Like, we're training hard for this, between our Robert and then Dane Reich, a local MN player who plays Zamasu a lot. And on the line is, if Robert wins the best of 3, Dane needs to wear a custom-made Yamcha t-shirt to the next major he attends. And it could say anything. Like, we could have it say Robert Wang is the best on the back or something like that. And if Robert loses, we need to post a video on here with Robert going through the entire Zamasu speech.
With the
and,
acting.
Like, doing the pose and everything. With the pose and everything. And, like, I offered to punch him in the face midway through, like Vegito, but they said violence wasn't allowed. So, what can you do?
So there's a friendly wager with Dane of the North Star Ballers. Yeah, I'm not even trying his last name. But I am accepting user submissions for what can go on the shirt after we're victorious, because like Yamcha's your daddy, anything like that. That's what I currently have leading the race. So Dane, you can throw in what you want in the comments and give us some suggestions. But yeah, we're training hard for this matchup. Yamcha's for real. After I win, hell, even if I get 1 win, we're still posting the deck profile up there, because I'm taking moral victories, because this is Yamcha versus Zamasu, best of 3. So here we go.
I think.
We still need to build you a sideboard.
I got a sideboard. Come on, man.
I think honestly, I think Yamcha is really interesting into the current meta, because so many, especially with the next set appearing to have decks that are playing really heavy battle card strategies, that becomes such an interesting deck, because all of a sudden this fringe ability to play Yamcha 100%, or some of the other cards that Yamcha has access to that deal damage via battle card swings, paired with like Sin Shenron where you can attack standing, it makes for such an interesting like deck option. Especially with that new Broly card that actually gives you a negate, like a legitimate red negate that's basically a Nimbus. that
Violent
becomes,
Race.
yep.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden, I think that stuff like Yamcha and Pilaf have more of a chance in the meta because oftentimes the red deck's issue is your options are go down to 1 and probably have no access to a negate, or stay at 2 and probably not do a lot on your turn. Like you become a very dirtle deck, which isn't necessarily what red wants to do because you would like to burn. But I think that that's actually a really interesting option personally.
Yeah, it's been
I
quite
also
a
think
journey. So it's been fun kind of finagling with the deck.
I also think it's
Mhm.
interesting because blues negate oftentimes against wide decks or decks that want to play a bunch of cards is now the Trunks topo-ish thing. The Trunks topo adjacent card that is like a topo but not quite as good
It's
because
worse.
it's not as good. It's great that it's a 1. Like I love that about it. And into some strategies it's amazing, but into something that into decks that play, typically 3 or less battle cards is their primary engine, like Ginyu or Pilaf, it feels real bad because it basically doesn't do anything except negate 1 attack.
You also need to remember though that Trunks doesn't make them discard unless it's more energy than their
Yeah,
current energy.
that's what I mean. So
Which,
it's a
like,
1
yeah,
negate, and then unless it's in like into strategies that typically go wide right now, like Ginyu and Pilaf and stuff like that, it or Skillus, it feels so bad because they're basically never going to play a battle card more than their energy. They're trying to cheat out a bunch of battle cards as opposed to, one big one, which
hmm
feels bad. I think the other thing that's been most interesting lately that we've had some play with is Robert has been playing his revised Skillus, which is, everybody talks about Skillus being meh. I know some people have even kind of even said before the anniversary box came out that they were underwhelmed with the Skillus support. Robert saw through it, and he was committed to getting those Skilless anniversary box cards that had to be shiny, and they're pretty baller cards in the deck.
Yeah, and shout out to Jake, another local. We practically played a mirror match. We didn't know, I took out my deck, he took out his deck. I was like, what are you playing? Skillless, skillless. And at the end, I think we had 3 cards that were different, something very similar. But he showed me the absolute monster that is Bonds of Friendship, Android 8. And then just being able to swing with your 1-drop skillless Goku. And then if you have Bonds of Battle with Android 8, you can then combo with your rested Goku, and then because you have Bonds of Friendship, you get to pop something, and if you sequence it correctly, you could potentially get 5 swings and clear their entire board, and it's totally gross. And so basically he got out his Android first, and started clearing my board. I got out my Android, and I wasn't super smart to clear his Android for some reason. I think I went after, his Heartfelt or something, that was big and scary, not thinking correctly. And then on his turn, he killed my Android again. And I'm sitting there like, wow, that just feels bad. But it's super gross because Bonds of Friendship is a 1 cost, and then on turn 2 you can play Bonds of Battle, and you get to dig through your deck for 2 1-drop skillless, which are going to be your Son Gokus, for offense and defense. And it's a very, very streamlined deck. I haven't seen the deck list for the top 8 that was skillless. I have to imagine it's something similar to that. It'll be interesting when the yellow skillless comes out, and how that kind of divides the Kid Q player base.
Yeah, I think.
Our,
Go ahead, Bertie.
already. Yeah, Dane, the same person Robert's doing that bet with, has been running that yellow skillless build, and it seems solid. Like, he's flooding the board and swinging a lot with a bunch of 15Ks, which is always scary.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, any time that you can play so many, I think the advantage to the red skillless engine is you have access more readily available to playing something like Heartfelt, where if you wanted to play more of not necessarily a boss monster strategy, but have something real big and scary, it gives you a better option in the mirror match, maybe. Just because I think I love the 2 cost from the anniversary box. Somebody called it like Baby O Booney because it gets you a couple of 10Ks, instead of 3 15Ks, you get 2 10Ks for 2. So it's kind of a perfect mirror to like Obuni, but it's on the cheap because you get it for 2 instead of 4. But then paired with your Unison, the Vegeta and Goku Jr., you get access to even more options where you give them +5. And now it's like a 2 energy Obuni, just 1 token less, which is insane because everybody talks about how busted Obuni is, but because it's in a skillless deck, people don't respect it until it punches them in the face. So
Yeah, and you can self-awaken if you need to, which in Kid Ku is
yep.
usually pretty good because you only need to get down to 6. And you can combo in Rested, which is gross, especially again if you have the Bonds of Friendship Android 8. So highly recommend the deck. It's pretty budget. I would say other than the Heartfelts, if you do get non-foiled or non-SPRs, but it's a lot of fun. It's really fast. I would say the new anniversary cards make sequencing a bit more to learn. You know, I'm used to just I'll play this and I'll swing, but it's good. I like it a lot. It's super fun. The anniversary cards I think really made it, didn't take anything away and just made it better.
Yeah. Well, and it gave the anniversary box didn't just give it access to a couple more tools for the skillless engine, but gave it max power Kamehameha, which is another thing that skillless oftentimes struggles with is skillless struggles with removal, and it feels like the anniversary box gave it a ton of removal because being able to combo with your Gokus in rest mode means that you can use the bonds of friendship or bonds
Yep.
of battle.
Bonds of Battle.
Bonds of battle.
Bonds
You
of
can use the
Battle.
bonds of battle, which gives you access to some softer removal or some removal of stuff like early game. And then if you really need to, you can use that max power Kamehameha to negate. You don't really mind warping 4 cards to get it back because your drop fills up so fast, especially with the way that some of the new cards function. And if you're comboing off the skillless 1Ks to get some removal, like there's tons of removal in the deck now, which is absolutely bananas because the deck basically didn't. That was always the struggle for me with Kid Ku, was it felt like it didn't have any removal.
Yeah, and again, you know, with after you remove it, then you can either use Bonds of Battle to get them back because it's your deck or your drop, and Universe 4 Assemble again from the draft box for 1 cost. You get 2 of them from your drop, and so you can just keep cycling Goku and popping stuff after swinging, so you can swing, then combo with it, then pop something. Like it's so much value. It's straight value town.
And I mean, that's at the end of the day, like that's what you're looking for in one of those wide board spam matchups. I think that's what makes that deck oftentimes feel so punishing is that skillless has higher than average combo power because its hand size is typically so big. And then on top of having higher than average combo power, it has a way to spam the board and recover really fast, which is the thing that oftentimes decks that go wide don't have is it takes them a few turns to build the board state. So if you can blow it up with like a Kaioken, then they basically now are 2 or 3 turns away from having a really scary board state. And Kid Ku is effectively like 3 energy away from having 4 skillless battle cards on deck, and then 1 unison marker away from everything being plus 5K. And all of a sudden you're staring down the barrel of 6 battle cards that are 15K or more, and it feels so bad because you're gonna take a beating. There's not a lot of way around it, and you're gonna take a lot of swings.
Super fun. Highly recommend.
Yeah, I think Kid Ku is great if you're looking for a not quite meta. Although the anniversary box, I would have to agree with Russell from Scouter Report, who said he thinks that some of this anniversary box can really push that deck to being really close to or a tier 1 deck. Like Kid Ku is always relevant because in DBS the game is about hand advantage, and Kid Ku does that more consistently and better. There's almost never a deck that's better than Kid Ku at gaining hand advantage.
Yeah, and I would say just the last point on this for me is that the anniversary box made the deck less reliant on Son Goku The Adventure Begins. You know, prior to the anniversary deck, if you didn't get Kid Ku to get the 4-star ball and pull out the Grandpa Gohan, you were basically dead in the water, or a fish out of water. Either way, you were dead. Now there's kind of multiple lines of play. As I mentioned, you could go Bonds of Friendship first, then Bonds of Battle, as opposed to Kid Q first, and then getting, cheating out Grandpa Gohan, I think, as the normal start. So there's multiple lines, which I
Yeah.
think adds a lot of complexity to the deck, and makes it harder for your opponents to kind of know exactly what you're doing.
So after all of that, I think we've done a really good job of covering a lot of things actually in a pretty short amount of time. You guys have any topic that you want to touch before we go? No.
I'm good.
Yeah, nothing on my mind. I think, someone on my Cell Deck profile asked about budget options. If anyone is watching, listening to us, and they want to hear us talk about something, throw it in the comments, and just
Yeah.
know that, we're working on it. Happy to
Yeah.
oblige.
Yeah, I know we want to do a Yamcha profile. We're trying to iron out Yamcha because I think the thing that we tend to do well as a group is we obviously want to play high tier decks. We want to go into competitions and play well. We like to be competitive players, but we really love the spice. That's kind of a thing that is universally beloved by this group of guys and this team is that we like to pride ourselves on being the spice masters. And when everyone else is showing up with like Vajix, we're like, yeah, we're playing Yamcha or we're playing, Dende Wish Power Rangers, which keep a lookout for that. That's the next one. I mean, that was a top 16 deck. I think it might have skirted by a lot of people and people might have missed out on it. Like you might not have maybe heard of the Dende Wish Power Rangers, but I know we had a great moment in the tournament where one of our teammates said, "So what'd you play last round?" And the guy said, "Yeah, I played a Dende Wish leader with the Power Rangers build." And Jason, who's on our team, said, "Oh, I know who you played. That's my teammate." Because we're pretty sure nobody else is running Dende Wish Rangers, and it is a super cool build, and I'm absolutely in love with it. I tried to put a Power Rangers deck together, and I built it with the Shenron lead went mono black, and it was not as good as Dane's Dende Wish. So we are going to put that deck profile together. Robert, hopefully, will have an excellent report next time we get together, and hopefully, you'll see a Yamcha build on the channel. But that is it, I think, for this week. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. If you like the podcast, if you like the YouTube channel, we would love a subscribe and a follow. We're getting close to 100, and we have a special surprise for everybody at 100 that will make everyone laugh and also will bring great joy to the community. So thanks so much for coming. Thanks so much for listening. We appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.